My name is Garrett Mitchell, 32 years old and working as a software developer in Portland. After Dad died 3 years ago, I moved back home to help Mom with the mortgage and bills. We were doing fine, or so I thought, until last Tuesday night. Over dinner, she casually dropped a bomb. "Your sister is coming with her 2 kids to live with us, so you need to leave, you parasite." I replied, "You're joking, right?" My mom laughed and said, "No, I'm serious. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my family." Drop a like and subscribe if you've ever had to deal with ungrateful relatives who took your kindness for weakness. Growing up in Portland, my relationship with my father Thomas was the cornerstone of my life. Dad was a construction foreman who worked 60-hour weeks to provide for our family, but still made time every weekend to take me fishing or teach me how to fix things around the house. "Self-sufficiency is freedom, Garrett," he would say while showing me how to change the oil in his truck or patch a hole in the drywall. Those moments defined my childhood and shaped the man I became. When Dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 4 years ago, the prognosis was grim. 6 months of watching him wither away broke something in all of us. But Mom Barbara seemed to take it the hardest. They had been high school sweethearts, married for 35 years, and suddenly she was alone. The night after the funeral, sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by casserole dishes from well-meaning neighbors, Mom broke down. "I don't know how I'm going to keep the house," she sobbed. "Your father handled all the finances." I was 29 then, living in a downtown apartment with a good job at a tech company. The decision seemed obvious at the time. "I'll move back home for a while," I offered. "Just until you get back on your feet." The relief in her eyes made me feel like I'd made the right choice. My sister Rachel, 3 years older than me and living in Chicago with her husband and kids, called me a saint when I told her my plans. "I could never do what you're doing," she said. "Kevin and I are just too established here." What started as a temporary arrangement slowly morphed into something more permanent. I converted Dad's old office into my workspace, started paying 70% of the mortgage and utilities, and even funded a kitchen renovation Mom had always wanted. My girlfriend Ashley was understanding at first, but after the first year, she started dropping hints about us getting our own place. "You can't put your life on hold forever," she would say. "Your mom needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet. But every time I brought up moving out, Mom would find a reason why she still needed me. The property taxes went up. The water heater broke. She was feeling depressed. The excuses were endless. And I always gave in. Dad had asked me to take care of her in those final lucid moments in the hospital, and I couldn't bring myself to break that promise. Meanwhile, my sister Rachel's life was imploding in slow motion. Her husband Kevin, a financial advisor with a gambling problem, had been siphoning money from his clients. When the authorities caught up to him, he fled the country, leaving Rachel with 2 kids, mountains of debt, and a reputation in tatters. This all happened about 6 months before my mother's shocking dinner announcement. Rachel had always been Mom's favorite, though nobody acknowledged it openly. When we were kids, Rachel's dance recitals took precedence over my baseball games. When we were teens, Rachel got a car for her 16th birthday while I had to save up for 2 years to buy a used Honda. When we were in college, Mom helped Rachel with tuition while telling me to apply for student loans because men should be self-sufficient. The pattern continued into adulthood. Mom would call me to complain about Rachel's problems, then in the next breath excuse them. "Your sister just feels things more deeply than other people," she would say. Or, "Rachel's always had bad luck with men, it's not her fault." I had learned to live with this dynamic, focusing instead on building my own life. My career was going well, with a recent promotion to senior developer. Ashley and I had been dating for 2 years, and she was dropping hints about engagement. I had even started looking at apartment listings, thinking it might finally be time to move on. My buddy Jason had been telling me for years that I was being taken advantage of, but I always defended Mom. She's just still grieving Dad, I would say. She'll be ready for me to move out soon. The tension had been building for weeks before that fateful dinner. Mom had been making passive-aggressive comments about my hours working from home, complaining about the noise when I had video calls, and critiquing Ashley whenever she visited. I chalked it up to her having a rough time and tried to be patient. That patience was about to be tested beyond anything I could have imagined. Tuesday night's dinner started like any other. I had spent the day coding and debugging a project that was due by the end of the week, emerging from my home office only for coffee refills and a quick lunch. Mom had made her specialty: lasagna with garlic bread, which usually signaled either a celebration or bad news. The dining room table was set with the good plates, another red flag I foolishly ignored. "So I've been thinking," Mom said casually, twirling pasta around her fork. "This arrangement we have isn't working for me anymore." I looked up, surprised. "What do you mean? Is it the mortgage?" "I can increase what I'm contributing if money's tight." She shook her head, taking a sip of wine. "No, it's not that. It's just, the house feels too crowded." I laughed, confused. "Mom, it's a 4-bedroom house, and there's just the two of us." "Well, that's going to change," she said, setting down her glass with a deliberate motion. "Rachel called last week. She and the kids need a fresh start after everything with Kevin. I told her they could move in here." "That makes sense." I nodded, still not seeing the problem. "The kids can take the guest room, and Rachel can use the basement bedroom. We'll be a bit cramped, but we'll make it work." Mom's face hardened. "You don't understand, Garrett. Rachel and I have discussed it, and we feel it would be best if you moved out. The kids need stability right now, and Rachel needs my full attention." I stared at her, fork suspended midway to my mouth. "You want me to move out? Of the house I've been paying for? So Rachel can move in?" "Don't be dramatic," Mom said with a dismissive wave. "You're a grown man with a good job. Rachel's a single mother with 2 kids and no income. Who needs the support more? I've been supporting you for 3 years," I said slowly, trying to process what was happening. "I've put my life on hold, paid most of the bills, renovated the kitchen. And we're very grateful," she interrupted, her tone suggesting anything but gratitude. "But Rachel's situation is different. She's in crisis. You're just stagnating here, living with your mother at your age. It's not healthy." The irony of her statement was staggering. For 3 years she had guilted me every time I mentioned moving out, and now suddenly it was unhealthy for me to be there. "When exactly is this supposed to happen?" I asked. My appetite completely gone. "Rachel's flying in on Thursday morning," Mom replied, as if discussing a dinner reservation rather than appending my life. "So you'll need to be out by tomorrow night." "Tomorrow?" I nearly shouted. "You're giving me 24 hours to find a new place to live?" "Well, technically 48 hours. But I'll need tomorrow to clean and prepare your room for the kids." She took another bite of lasagna, chewing thoughtfully. "You're resourceful. I'm sure you'll figure something out." "This is insane," I said, pushing my plate away. "You can't legally evict me with 2 days' notice. I've been paying the mortgage. I have tenant rights." Mom's expression changed then, hardening into something I'd never seen directed at me before. "Your sister is coming with her 2 kids to live with us, so you need to leave, you parasite." The word parasite hit me like a physical blow. After everything I'd sacrificed, that's how she saw me? "You're joking, right?" I managed to say. She laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "No. I'm serious. This arrangement has gone on long enough. Rachel needs me now. And I needed you for the past 3 years." I countered. "I needed you to appreciate the sacrifices I was making. I needed you to acknowledge that I put my life on hold to help you." "Nobody asked you to do that," she snapped. That was your choice. And now I'm making my choice. Rachel and the kids are moving in, and you're moving out. End of discussion. Does Rachel know you're kicking me out with no notice? That I'd been paying the mortgage all this time? Mom shifted uncomfortably. I told her you'd agreed it was time for you to get your own place. That you were excited about the next chapter. So you lied to her, I said flatly. Just like you've been lying to me, pretending you still needed my support when really you were just taking advantage. Don't be so dramatic, she repeated. Her go-to phrase whenever confronted with her own behavior. This isn't personal. Rachel just needs more help than you do right now. It's absolutely personal, I said, pushing back from the table. You're choosing Rachel over me, just like you always have. The difference is this time you're not even pretending otherwise. That's not fair, she protested, but her eyes couldn't meet mine. You know what's not fair? Treating the son who's supported you like garbage while bending over backwards for the daughter who only calls when she needs something. Mom's face flushed with anger. Rachel has always been more sensitive than you. She needs more support. You've always been independent like your father. And that's why you resent me, I said, the realization dawning. Because I remind you of Dad. Don't psychoanalyze me, she snapped. This isn't about your father. This is about what's best for the family right now. The family? I laughed bitterly. Or just the parts of it you care about. I've made my decision, she said firmly. You need to be out by tomorrow night. Rachel's flight gets in early Thursday morning. I stood up, suddenly calm in the face of this betrayal. You know what? You're right about one thing. It is time for me to leave. But not because you're kicking me out. Because I finally see clearly what I've been denying for years. And what's that? She asked, her tone mocking. That no matter what I do, it will never be enough for you. That in your eyes? I'll always be less deserving than Rachel. I started walking toward my bedroom. I'll be gone tomorrow. Not because you demanded it, but because I deserve better than this. Garrett, wait. Mom called after me, her voice suddenly less certain. We can discuss this rationally. There's nothing to discuss, I said without turning around. You've made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I spent that night pacing my bedroom, too angry and hurt to sleep. Around midnight I called my best friend Jason, who had been warning me for years that Mom was taking advantage of my guilt and good nature. She actually called you a parasite? Jason asked, incredulous. After you've been bankrolling her lifestyle for 3 years? Yep, I confirmed, the words still stinging hours later. And now she's giving me 48 hours to get out so Rachel and her kids can move in. That's not even legal, Jason said. You've established tenancy. She needs to give you proper notice according to state law. I know, but fighting to stay somewhere I'm not wanted seems pointless. I sighed. I just can't believe after everything I've done. This is how she treats me. Look, my spare room is yours if you need it, Jason offered. Stay as long as you need to figure things out. His generosity, so stark in contrast to my own mother's behavior, nearly broke me. Thanks, man. I might take you up on that, at least temporarily. As I hung up, I realized the decision ahead of me wasn't just about where to live. It was about finally breaking free from a toxic family dynamic that had been draining me for years. Sleep eluded me that night. As the hours crawled by, anger gave way to a strange sense of clarity. By dawn, I found myself sitting on the floor of my bedroom surrounded by bank statements, receipts, and mortgage documents I dug out of my filing cabinet. The numbers told a story more eloquent than any words could. Over the past 3 years, I had contributed $62,847 toward the mortgage. Another $15,000 for the kitchen renovation. Approximately $20,000 for utilities, property taxes, and homeowners insurance. Nearly $100,000 invested in a house that wasn't in my name, that I was now being told to vacate with less than 2 days' notice. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dad had always taught me to keep meticulous financial records, a habit that had served me well in my professional life and was now illuminating just how thoroughly I'd been taken advantage of in my personal one. I pulled out my phone and texted my law school buddy, Marcus. "Hey, weird question, but do you know anything about tenant rights when there's no formal lease? Been living with and financially supporting my mom for 3 years. Now she's giving me 48 hours to move out." His response came surprisingly quickly for 6 in the morning. "That's illegal as hell. In Oregon, established tenancy without a lease requires minimum 30 days written notice, even for family. Want me to send a scary lawyer letter?" I considered it briefly before declining. A legal battle would only prolong the inevitable and potentially damage relationships beyond repair. What I needed wasn't to fight for my right to stay in a place where I wasn't valued. I needed a clean break and a fresh start. "Thanks, but I'm ready to move on. Just wanted to confirm my rights in case things get messy." My next call was to Walter, the family friend who had been our landlord before Mom and Dad bought the house 15 years ago. Walter had helped with the purchase and knew the property's history better than anyone. "Garrett, my boy, how are you?" His gravelly voice boomed through the phone. "It's been ages." "Not great, Walter," I admitted, explaining the situation. There was a long pause before he responded. "Son, I hate to add to your troubles, but there's something you should know. Your dad put the house in your mother's name only, against my advice. He wanted her to have security if anything happened to him. So I have no claim to any of the money I've put into it," I stated flatly. "Legally? No. Morally? That's a different story. You've been paying that mortgage for 3 years. In my book, that entitles you to something." After thanking Walter and hanging up, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything. Then, with sudden determination, I opened my laptop and began researching. First, apartment listings. Nothing suitable was immediately available, but Jason's offer would give me time to find the right place. Next, storage units for furniture and belongings I couldn't immediately relocate. Then, moving companies that offered same-day service. As my plan took shape, I felt a weight lifting. This wasn't just about finding a new place to live, it was about reclaiming my independence, my self-respect, and my future. Around 8, I heard Mom moving around in the kitchen, making coffee. I had no desire to face her after last night's confrontation, so I remained sequestered in my room, making calls with the door closed. By 9, I had secured a storage unit 10 miles away, scheduled movers for an emergency same-day service, at a premium rate that made me wince but felt worth it, and contacted a locksmith who could come by that afternoon. The locksmith gave me pause. Changing the locks would be an aggressive move, potentially escalating the situation. But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed necessary. Mom had demonstrated she didn't respect boundaries or fairness. What was to stop her from throwing my belongings on the lawn while I was out arranging the move? I checked Oregon law to confirm my rights. As an established tenant who had been contributing to the mortgage, I couldn't legally change the locks to keep Mom out permanently. However, as long as I provided her with the new keys before she returned home, I wasn't breaking any laws. It would simply buy me the time I needed to move out on my terms, not hers. Around 10. Mom knocked on my door. "Garrett? I'm going to the airport to pick up Rachel and the kids. Their flight got moved up. We should talk when I get back." Perfect. The airport was an hour away, and with greeting time and baggage claim, I'd have at least 3 to 4 hours of uninterrupted time to execute my plan. "Sure," I responded neutrally. "We'll talk later." I heard her car pull out of the driveway 15 minutes later. As soon as she was gone, I sprang into action, calling the movers and locksmith to move up our appointments. Then I called Ashley. "She did what?" Ashley exclaimed after I explained the situation. "After everything you've done for her?" I know it's short notice, but can you come help me pack? I've got movers coming in an hour. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she promised. And Garrett? I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Her words hit me harder than expected. Standing up for myself. Had it really taken this level of betrayal for me to finally do that? As I began packing up my life, I realized with startling clarity that this wasn't just about finding a new place to live. It was about breaking free from a pattern of emotional manipulation and taking back control of my life. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something unexpected: hope. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of activity. Ashley arrived as promised, armed with cardboard boxes she'd picked up from the liquor store and a determined expression that said she was ready for battle. Where do we start? She asked, surveying my bedroom. Clothes and electronics first, I decided. Then books and personal items. Furniture can wait for the movers. We worked in efficient tandem, falling into a rhythm that reminded me why we made such a good team. Ashley didn't waste time with platitudes or empty reassurances. Instead, she focused on the task at hand, occasionally squeezing my arm or giving me a supportive look when she came across something particularly meaningful. The locksmith arrived at 11:30. A middle-aged man named Ray who asked few questions as he replaced the front and back door locks. New keys, he said, handing me 2 sets. Make sure everyone who needs one gets one. I thanked him and paid the $375 fee without blinking. The peace of mind was worth every penny. By noon, the movers had arrived. 3 burly men who approached the job with professional efficiency. They started with my bedroom furniture, carefully disassembling the bed frame and wrapping the dresser in protective blankets. As they worked, I found myself wandering through the house, seeing it with new eyes. The kitchen I'd renovated last year, installing the quartz countertops Mom had always wanted. The living room where Dad and I had watched countless football games. The backyard where he taught me to throw a baseball. In my father's old office, now my workspace. I found myself opening drawers and cabinets, ensuring nothing was left behind. In the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, beneath tax documents and user manuals, I found a manila envelope I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter addressed to me in my father's handwriting, dated 2 weeks before he died. My hands trembled as I opened it. Dear Garrett, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're cleaning out my office. I hope some time has passed and the initial grief has eased. There are things I need to tell you that I may not have the strength to say in person. I sank into the desk chair, the bustle of moving fading into background noise as I read my father's final words to me. I've always been proud of you, son. Your kindness, your integrity, your work ethic. These are the qualities that matter. But I worry that your kindness might be taken advantage of, especially by those closest to you. Your mother and sister have always leaned heavily on you. And without me there to balance things, that dependency might intensify. Remember that helping others is noble, but not at the expense of your own life and happiness. There will come a time when you'll need to put yourself first, and when that time comes, know that you have my blessing. Don't let guilt or obligation keep you from building the life you deserve. The house is in your mother's name because that's what she wanted, but my hope was always that it would be a temporary safety net, not a permanent arrangement. Live your life, son. Find someone who values you as much as I do. Create your own family if that's what you want. Just don't get stuck trying to fix what cannot be fixed or earn love that should be freely given. All my love, Dad. Tears blurred my vision as I carefully folded the letter and placed it in my wallet. It felt like a message from beyond, arriving exactly when I needed it most. Dad had seen what I couldn't, had tried to warn me in his gentle way. And now, 3 years later, I was finally hearing him. Garrett? Ashley called from the hallway. The movers need to know if you want them to take the desk. I wiped my eyes quickly. Yeah, it's coming with us. By 2 o'clock, the house looked strangely barren. My bedroom was empty except for the curtains, and some wall hangings I'd left behind. My home office was cleared out, all the equipment carefully packed and loaded onto the moving truck. Even my contributions to the common areas, the television I'd bought last Christmas, the coffee table I'd refinished, the bookshelves full of my collection, were gone. What remained was a house half full of furniture, like a partially erased picture. It struck me as an apt metaphor for what my presence in this family had meant. Substantial but ultimately expendable. As the movers finished loading the last of my belongings, I did a final walk-through, checking closets and cabinets for anything overlooked. In my haste, I'd packed efficiently but not always thoughtfully. Some items I'd left behind deliberately, like the power tools I'd bought to maintain the house. Others I'd taken that probably should have stayed. Like the expensive coffee maker I'd gifted Mom last birthday. But perfect fairness wasn't the goal here. A clean break was. In the kitchen. I wrote a note and left it on the counter along with one set of the new keys. Mom! As requested, I've moved out. I've changed the locks for security during the moving process. But I'm leaving you the new keys. I've taken only what belongs to me, though given my financial contributions to this household over the past 3 years, that line is admittedly blurry. I've paid the mortgage through the end of this month. After that, you're on your own. We should talk about a fair settlement regarding the money I've invested in this house. But that can wait until emotions aren't running so high. I truly hope Rachel and the kids find the stability they need. I wish things had ended differently between us. Garrett. I left the house key with Mrs. Abernathy next door, asking her to give it to my mother when she returned. Mrs. Abernathy, who had watched me grow up and had brought over a casserole when Dad died, looked troubled by the hastily packed moving truck and my obvious distress. Your mother's making a mistake, she said, patting my hand. She'll realize it soon enough. Thanks, Mrs. Abernathy, I said, not sure I believed her but appreciating the sentiment. Take care. As I climbed into my car to follow the moving truck to the storage facility, I took one last look at the house where I'd grown up, where I'd grieved my father, where I'd spent 3 years trying to fill his shoes. It looked smaller somehow, less significant than it had just 24 hours ago. I felt a complex mix of emotions as I pulled away from the curb. Sadness for what had been lost. Anger at the injustice of it all. But mostly, surprisingly, relief. Like I'd put down a heavy burden I hadn't fully acknowledged carrying. Ready? Ashley asked from the passenger seat, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I nodded, putting the car in drive. More than ready. Jason's apartment was a far cry from the spacious house I'd just left. The spare room barely fit my bed and dresser, with boxes stacked along one wall creating a cardboard cityscape. But the cramped quarters came with something my mother's house had increasingly lacked: genuine welcome. Mi casa yes su casa, Jason said, handing me a beer as we collapsed onto his couch after the movers left. Stay as long as you need, seriously. I appreciate it, man. It won't be long. I've already got some apartment viewings lined up for next week. Ashley had stayed to help unpack the essentials before heading to her evening shift at the hospital. Call me when you're settled, she'd said, kissing me goodbye. And Garrett? I think this is going to turn out to be the best thing that could have happened. My phone, which I'd deliberately silenced during the move, now showed 27 missed calls. 22 from Mom, 3 from Rachel, and 2 from numbers I didn't recognize but assumed were extended family members already being recruited into the drama. The voicemails started relatively calm but escalated quickly. Garrett, it's Mom. Where are you? We just got home and, what happened to the locks? Call me back immediately. Garrett. This isn't funny. We're standing outside with 2 tired children and can't get into the house. The neighbors said you moved out? Call me now. This is completely irresponsible behavior. You can't just change the locks on someone else's house. I'm considering calling the police. Rachel's messages were less controlled from the start. What the actual hell, Garrett? Mom said you agreed to move out, not throw a tantrum and change the locks. Grow up. By the final messages, Mom had shifted from anger to a manipulative concern. Honey, I'm worried about you. This behavior isn't like you. I know you must be upset, but we can work this out. Please call me back. We're family. I turned the phone off and tossed it aside, not ready to engage. The emotional whiplash was too much, too soon. They got home, huh? Jason asked, raising an eyebrow at my expression. Yep. And they're spinning it like I'm the unreasonable one. I took a long pull of my beer. Apparently changing the locks was a tantrum, not a reasonable precaution when someone tries to kick you out with no notice. Classic gaslighting. Jason nodded. Make you the villain so they don't have to face being the bad guys. That first night away from my childhood home was strange. The unfamiliar sounds of Jason's apartment building, the different rhythm of his household, the knowledge that I was essentially homeless at 32, all made for restless sleep. But beneath the discomfort was a surprising undercurrent of freedom. No more walking on eggshells around Mom's moods. No more sacrificing my wants and needs for a gratitude that never materialized. No more putting my life with Ashley on hold for just a little longer. The next morning, I called into work and explained the situation to my manager, who was surprisingly understanding. Take the rest of the week to get situated, she said. Work remotely if you can, but don't stress about deadlines right now. Personal emergencies take priority. With that pressure relieved, I finally turned my phone back on, bracing for the barrage of notifications. What I found was worse than I expected. Mom had posted a vague but pointed status on Facebook. Heartbroken by my son's betrayal. Never thought I'd be treated this way after everything I've done for him. Please pray for our family during this difficult time. The post had garnered dozens of sympathetic comments, many from extended family members and family friends expressing shock at my apparent cruelty and offering support to Mom in her time of need. Rachel had been more direct, posting a long rant about entitled man-children and the audacity of changing locks on a grieving widow. She'd even included a photo of her kids looking sad on the front porch, bags at their feet, for maximum emotional impact. The narrative had been established without my input. I was the villain who had abandoned his poor mother and sister in their time of need, cruelly locking them out of their own home out of spite. Jason found me staring at my phone, jaw clenched in anger. Social media smear campaign? He guessed, glancing over my shoulder. Yikes. That's low. They're making it sound like I left them homeless, I said. When that's literally what Mom tried to do to me. So set the record straight, Jason suggested. Post your side. I considered it briefly before shaking my head. That just extends the drama. And honestly, anyone who knows me, really knows me, won't believe this garbage. As if on cue, my phone rang with a call from Uncle Pete, Dad's brother. Garrett, he said when I answered. What in the world is going on? Your mother's telling everyone you abandoned her, but that doesn't sound like you at all. I gave him the abbreviated version of events, including the financial support I'd provided for 3 years and Mom's 48-hour eviction notice. There was a long silence before he responded. That tracks with what I know of your mother. Unfortunately, your dad protected you kids from the worst of her selfishness, but I saw it. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, son. His validation meant more than I could express. Thanks, Uncle Pete. It helps to know someone from the family doesn't think I'm a monster. Far from it. Listen, Diane and I have that rental property that's between tenants right now. It's small, but it's furnished and available immediately if you need a place to stay. His offer brought an unexpected lump to my throat. I might take you up on that. Let me figure out my next steps and I'll let you know. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. People fell into 3 categories. Those who immediately believed Mom's version and condemned me without hearing my side, those who knew me well enough to suspect there was more to the story and reached out directly. And those who stayed neutral, unwilling to take sides in a family dispute. Ashley was my rock throughout it all. Coming over after her shifts to help me apartment hunt online and reminding me that I deserved better than what my family had done. "This is their loss, not yours," she would say. "You're the most dependable, generous person I know. Anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you in their life." Jason proved himself a true friend. Never complaining about the disruption to his bachelor lifestyle, and even accompanying me to apartment viewings when Ashley was working. A week after the move, I found myself sitting in Jason's living room, scrolling through apartment listings, when a realization struck me. Despite the upheaval, the public family drama, and the uncertainty about my living situation, I felt lighter. The constant background anxiety of trying to please my mother, of walking the tightrope between my obligations to her and my desire for my own life, had dissipated. I'd been living under a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged, and now that it was gone, I could finally breathe. My phone lit up with another call from Mom, the fifth that day. I'd been avoiding direct contact, responding only to texts with brief, factual replies. But it was time to face the music. This situation needed resolution, for all our sakes. "I'll talk to them," I told Jason, standing up with sudden determination. "But on my terms, not theirs. In a public place, with witnesses." "Want backup?" he offered immediately. I shook my head. "This is something I need to do alone. But thanks." I texted Mom, "I'm ready to talk. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. Riverside Coffee. Just you, no Rachel." Her response came quickly. "We'll be there." So much for boundaries. But I was done being manipulated. It was time to stand firm. Time to advocate for myself the way I wished I had 3 years ago. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would finally be the author of my own story, not a supporting character in someone else's. Riverside Coffee sat on a quiet corner overlooking the Willamette River. I chose it deliberately for its public nature and neutral territory. Arriving 15 minutes early, I selected a table near the back with a clear view of the entrance, and ordered a black coffee to steady my nerves. At exactly 11, the bell above the door jingled. Mom entered first, scanning the room until her eyes landed on me. She'd clearly put effort into her appearance, wearing the blue dress she reserved for church and family photos, her hair freshly styled. The message was clear: presentation matters, especially when you're planning to play the victim. Rachel followed close behind, her 2 children, Emma and Noah, in tow. "So much for just you." "No, Rachel. I should have expected as much." The kids were a strategic choice, emotional collateral to make confrontation more difficult. "Uncle Garrett," 7-year-old Emma squealed, breaking away from her mother to run toward me. Her genuine enthusiasm cut through some of my tension, reminding me that the children were innocent parties in all this. I stood to give her a hug. "Hey, Squirt. You've gotten taller. 2 inches since Christmas," she announced proudly. Noah, at 5, was more reserved, clutching his mother's hand and regarding me with solemn eyes. He'd been too young when Rachel moved to Chicago to remember me well. "Garrett," Mom said, her voice carrying just the right note of wounded dignity. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." I gestured to the chairs. "Have a seat. Though I was expecting just you, Mom. We're family," Rachel interjected, ushering the children into chairs. "We should discuss this as a family." "Fine," I conceded, knowing this battle wasn't worth fighting. "Kids, there's a play area in the back corner. Why don't you check it out while the grown-ups talk?" Emma needed no further encouragement. Dragging her brother toward the small collection of toys and books the coffee shop maintained for young customers. Once they were out of earshot, I turned back to face my mother and sister. "Before we start," I said calmly, "I want to make one thing clear. I'm here to discuss a resolution, not to be manipulated or guilted. If that's your plan, this meeting is over before it begins. Mom's expression tightened. No one is trying to manipulate you, Garrett. We're concerned. Your behavior has been erratic and hurtful. My behavior? I couldn't help but laugh. Mom. You tried to kick me out with 48 hours notice after I spent 3 years supporting you financially and emotionally. You called me a parasite. And now you're surprised I didn't just roll over and take it. I never used that word. Mom protested, though her eyes flickered away, unable to meet mine. Yes, you did. At dinner last Tuesday. Right after you told me Rachel and the kids were moving in and I needed to leave. Rachel leaned forward. Mom said you'd agreed it was time for you to get your own place. That you were excited about it. Another lie. I said, keeping my voice level despite my rising anger. She told me about your arrival with no warning and expected me to vacate immediately. When I pointed out that wasn't reasonable or legal, she called me a parasite. Mom's facade cracked slightly. I was upset. I didn't mean it that way. How exactly did you mean it? I asked. When she didn't answer, I continued. Look, I didn't come here to rehash the argument. What's done is done. I've moved out, as requested. Now we need to discuss the financial aspects of this situation. I reached into my messenger bag and pulled out a folder containing the financial records I'd compiled. Spreadsheets detailed every mortgage payment, utility bill, and home improvement expense I'd covered over the past 3 years. In total, I've contributed $97,623 to a house that's solely in your name. I said, sliding the summary sheet across the table. That's not including groceries, minor repairs, or the daily support I provided. Mom barely glanced at the page before pushing it back. You lived there. That was rent. Rent? I repeated incredulously. $97,000 for 3 years in a house I grew up in? That's nearly $3,000 a month. For a bedroom and shared space. In Portland, not Manhattan. You had the home office too. She countered weakly. An office I needed because I was working full-time to support us. I pointed out. Mom, this isn't about getting every penny back. It's about acknowledging that I made a significant investment in a property I'm now being forced out of with no notice. That's not fair by any standard. Rachel, who had been surprisingly quiet, finally spoke up. What exactly are you asking for, Garrett? Mom doesn't have that kind of money. I'm aware, I said. Which is why I see 2 options. Either Mom refinances the mortgage to pull out some equity to reimburse me partially, or we sell the house and split the proceeds in a way that reflects my contributions. Sell the house? Mom's voice rose in pitch. Your father built that house for us. Dad bought that house. I corrected gently. And he would be appalled at how you've treated me after everything I've done to keep it in the family. The mention of Dad seemed to hit home in a way nothing else had. Mom's carefully composed expression crumpled slightly. I can't sell the house, she said, her voice smaller now. It's all I have left of him. And yet you were willing to kick his son out onto the street with no warning. I observed. Does that sound like something Dad would approve of? Rachel interjected again, her tone less combative than before. What about a compromise? Mom doesn't sell, but she refinances to give you something for your contributions? Not the full amount, but a fair portion? I considered this. It wasn't perfect, but it acknowledged the principle of the matter. I could accept that, depending on the amount. But there's another issue we need to address. What's that? Mom asked warily. The mortgage, I said. I've been paying 70% of it for 3 years. Without my income, can you afford to keep the house? The silence that followed answered my question. Mom looked down at her untouched coffee, while Rachel shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I thought as much. I sighed. So your plan was, what? Exactly? Have Rachel and the kids move in with no way to cover the mortgage? Rachel will get a job, Mom said defensively. And I can increase my hours at the library. Mom, I make 6 figures as a senior developer, and even I was stretching to cover our expenses. I pointed out. Rachel has been out of the workforce for years, and you work part-time. The math doesn't add up. Rachel's face flushed with anger or embarrassment. It was hard to tell which. We would have figured something out. We always do. No, I corrected her. I always figured it out. I always covered the shortfall. I always made sure the bills were paid on time. And my reward was being called a parasite and told to leave with 2 days' notice. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. In the background, I could hear Emma's delighted laughter as she played with the coffee shop's toys, oblivious to the tense conversation happening just yards away. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you want us to do, Garrett? We can't afford the house without you. We have nowhere else to go. The irony was almost too much. Funny, that's exactly the position you put me in last week. So this is revenge? Rachel asked. Making us homeless to get back at Mom? No, I said firmly. This is reality. Actions have consequences. Mom chose to kick out the person paying most of the bills without any plan to replace that income. That wasn't my decision. It was hers. I softened my tone slightly, seeing the genuine fear in their eyes. Look, I don't want you to be homeless. Despite everything, you're still family. But I'm not moving back in. And I'm not continuing to pay for a house I've been kicked out of. Then what's your solution? Mom asked. We sell the house, I said. It's appreciated significantly since Dad bought it. With the current market, you should walk away with enough to buy something smaller, mortgage-free. Rachel and the kids can either stay with you or use their portion for a rental deposit. My portion? Rachel looked confused. Yes, your portion, I confirmed. Dad would have wanted the house proceeds to benefit all of us. A third each seems fair. After my contributions are accounted for. And if we refuse? Mom's chin lifted defiantly. Then I'll be forced to pursue legal options, I said, though the thought gave me no pleasure. I've consulted an attorney. While the house is solely in your name, I can make a strong case for what's called unjust enrichment based on my documented contributions and our verbal agreements. It would be messy, expensive, and public. I'd rather avoid that if possible. The mention of legal action seemed to deflate Mom's remaining resistance. She looked suddenly older, smaller. Like the fight had drained out of her. I never thought it would come to this, she said, a tear slipping down her cheek. Your father would be so disappointed. Yes, I agreed quietly. He would be. But not in me. I stood, gathering my documents. Think about what I've proposed. Talk it over. Let me know your decision by the end of the week. For what it's worth. I'm sorry it came to this too. As I walked toward the door, Emma ran over for a goodbye hug. Are you coming back to Grandma's house soon, Uncle Garrett? I knelt to her level. Not this time, kiddo. But we'll still see each other, I promise. Looking back at Mom and Rachel one last time, I added, family doesn't end because we live in different houses. At least, it doesn't have to. With that, I walked out into the sunlight, feeling the weight of the confrontation lifting with each step. Whatever they decided, I had stood my ground and advocated for myself. Dad would have been proud. 2 months can change everything. That's what I kept thinking as I carried the last box into my new apartment. A spacious 2-bedroom in a renovated historic building downtown. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot. Is that the last one? Ashley called from the kitchen, where she was unpacking dishes we'd bought together the previous weekend. Last one, I confirmed, setting the box down with a relieved sigh. Who knew I had so much stuff? She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her jeans. Most of it's books. I'm dating a nerd, remember? Lucky you. I grinned, pulling her into my arms. How's it feel? Our first place together. It feels right, she said simply, resting her head against my chest. Long overdue, but right. The journey to this moment had been complicated, filled with difficult conversations and painful realizations. But standing in our new home, holding the woman I loved, I felt a profound sense of peace that had eluded me for years. After the coffee shop confrontation, Mom and Rachel had initially doubled down on their narrative of my betrayal. The social media campaign intensified briefly, with distant relatives and family friends taking sides based on partial information. But reality has a way of asserting itself, especially when mortgage payments come due. 2 weeks after our meeting, Mom called with a changed tone. "We need to talk about selling the house," she said, the fight gone from her voice. "You were right. We can't afford it without you." The subsequent negotiations were handled primarily through real estate agents and attorneys, minimizing the emotional confrontations. The housing market in Portland was still strong, and the sale happened quickly. After my contributions were accounted for, and the remaining proceeds split 3 ways, Mom had enough to purchase a small 2-bedroom condo outright. Rachel and the kids stayed with her temporarily while Rachel completed a paralegal certification program, leveraging her portion for education rather than housing. My professional life flourished once freed from the constant drain of family drama. The promotion I'd been in line for came through, along with a significant raise. My work, no longer interrupted by Mom's demands or cramped home office conditions, improved in quality and efficiency. My manager even mentioned future leadership opportunities if my performance continued on this trajectory. But the most profound changes were internal. The constant background guilt that had colored my decisions for 3 years gradually faded. I stopped automatically assuming responsibility for others' problems. I learned to set boundaries and stick to them, even when doing so was uncomfortable. Ashley noticed the difference immediately. "You stand taller," she observed one evening as we walked along the river. "Like you're not carrying the weight of the world anymore." She was right. I felt lighter, clearer, more authentically myself than I had since before Dad died. The relationship with Mom and Rachel remained complicated. We were civil but distant, the trust broken between us taking time to repair, if it ever could be fully. I maintained contact with Emma and Noah through occasional video calls and birthday gifts, unwilling to punish the children for their grandmother's and mother's actions. Uncle Pete and Aunt Diane became more prominent figures in my life, providing the family connection I still craved without the toxic dynamics. "You remind me so much of your father," Uncle Pete said during a fishing trip we took together. "Not just in looks, but in character. He would be proud of how you've handled all this." Those words meant more than he could know. As Ashley and I settled into our new home and life together, I found myself reflecting on the lessons of the past few months, trying to extract meaning from the pain and betrayal. I'd learned that love shouldn't require constant sacrifice or come with conditions. I'd learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. I'd learned that some family bonds are strengthened by distance rather than proximity. And perhaps most importantly, I'd learned that it's never too late to change your story, to rewrite the role you've been playing and claim the life you deserve. The letter from Dad, which I'd framed and hung in our new home office, served as a daily reminder of these truths. His foresight and wisdom continued to guide me, even years after his passing. On a warm Sunday evening, 6 months after the fateful dinner that changed everything, Ashley and I hosted our first dinner party in the new apartment. Jason and his new girlfriend, Uncle Pete and Aunt Diane, a few close friends from work, all gathered around our dining table, filling the space with laughter and conversation. As I looked around at these people who loved me without conditions, who supported me without keeping score, I felt a sense of homecoming more profound than any house could provide. This was what family was supposed to feel like. This was what Dad had wanted for me all along. Later that night, after everyone had gone and Ashley had fallen asleep, I stood by our bedroom window looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom, the first in weeks. The condo feels like home now. Rachel got a job offer. The kids ask about you. Maybe someday we can try again. I didn't respond immediately, knowing that any relationship moving forward would need to be built on new terms, with mutual respect at its foundation. But I felt a small opening in my heart. A willingness to consider the possibility of reconciliation, not for her sake but for my own peace. Whatever happened with Mom and Rachel, I knew one thing with certainty. I would never again compromise my self-respect for approval that should be freely given. I would never again mistake sacrifice for love. And I would never again put my life on hold waiting for permission to live it. Have you ever had to make a difficult break from family to preserve your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary for your growth and happiness. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content about navigating complex family dynamics and personal growth. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.